So reparations should be treated as an inheritance? Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. And I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. And I always do appreciate all my viewers, anyone who watches my videos. I do appreciate that. But in one of my most recent videos, my case against reparations, in which I made the case that black people basically aren't owed reparations, blacks today. Black people don't deserve any reparations. And the last thing that you want to do is put money in the hands of basically ignorant blacks or niggas. Now, I got a lot of disagrees. People responded. Someone responded by saying that when they do hand out the checks, you get none. I got such things as simp and typical nonsense from brainwashed blacks. But one person tried to make the case that, well, black people do deserve reparation based upon next of kin laws. I mean, if somebody was supposed to get something, was owed something, well, if they're not here, then it will go to the next of kin. And you know what? Okay, you get no argument for me on there. But then you open up a whole nother can of worms, because then, as I've always said before, when it comes down to reparations, you have to prove your lineage, that you are owed based upon your lineage. I mean, if you are a black person in America and your people migrated from Africa in the 70s, where you are not owed any reparations, and you have to prove that. So you have to trace your lineage all the way back to the first group of people who would have gotten reparations. Again, there was never any agreed upon amount what the reparations would be. Now, many people always talk about 40 acres of the mule, but then that was just I believe that was just South Carolina. That was a South Carolina proposal, and that was not per person, that was per family. But anyway, you have to trace your lineage all the way back to the first group of people who were freed and who owed the reparations. And then if only part or half your family was enslaved, well, then you only get half. And if you trace back the lineage of both your grandparents and your grandfather or and on both sides of the family, paternal and maternal, and they were both slaves, then you are in line for reparations. However, then you'd have to break it down, the lineage in children and such. So for instance, let's say that the first people in your lineage who was supposed to get the reparations, they got married. They get double portion, whatever it is, and let's say they have 7 children. Well, then that double portion then has to be divided by 7. And that's what each one of the children take. And then they get married. They bring that to the table with the person that they married, and what they bring to the table divided by their children, and so on and so forth. And you have to trace your lineage down to the oldest living generation. And the oldest living generation gets the reparations, because you can't give a reparation inheritance out to everybody. Only one person can get, only one generation can get the inheritance. So if your grandparents and great-grandparents are alive, well, then whatever they would have gotten, they get it, and then that's where it stops, because you can't, unless they choose to hand it down to their children. But at one certain generation, the inheritance stops, because let's say that the first generation that would have got the inheritance, right? Let's say that your paternal side of the family would have gotten his reparations and went out blown it. You would just went blew it. Well, there would be no reparations to hand down. So only one generation can get their reparations, and they have to decide what generation does. So if your grandparents and grandfather and grandmother on one side of the family are dead, well, then it will go to their children, and then they have to decide what they're going to do with it. So if you want to treat reparations as an inheritance, then that's how we have to do it. Because again, if you have an inheritance, everybody don't get the inheritance. If my great-great-grandparents left an inheritance to my grandparents, that doesn't necessarily mean they left it to me. They left it to them. Now, what they did with it, what my grandparent did with their inheritance, well, that's on with them. What if my grandparent would have went out and blew of my grandfather on one side of my family would have went out and blew his inheritance, well, that would be nothing for me. Again, you have to prove your lineage, and you have to track down each family member and divide by all the children and hand it out, and then till we get to the oldest living generation, and those are the people who get the reparation. If you want to do that, that's perfectly fine once we agreed upon an agreed upon amount of what reparations should be. And honestly, once we get to the point of dividing it amongst all these children, because remember, back in the day, people had a lot of children. I mean, once they get down to our generation, if we actually get it, because most of us still have our parents and some grandparents, when we probably get nothing, and maybe $200 or $300 at the most. But anyway, if reparations is going to be treated as inherited, this is all the steps that we have to go through to disperse it. Anyway, y'all, that's my 2 cents on this. If we want to do that, perfectly fine, but don't expect much. Anyway, y'all, as always, until next time.